You probably have a ghost. And I don't mean like a haunting in your attic.
Right, no phantom rattling chains in the hallway.
Exactly. I mean the ghost ship of your own life. The path you didn't take, just sort of sailing right alongside you in the fog.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it.
Yeah. And today on our deep dive, we're looking at the exact moment you decide to abandon that ship.
Yeah.
And the psychological toll it takes to stand on the shore and watch shit sail away without you.
Yeah.
Because we all do it, don't we?
We do.
We make choices. We choose the safe job over the risky passion, the comfortable hometown over the terrifying new city. We choose the person who makes us feel secure over the person who makes us feel entirely dangerously alive.
It's basically the defining human dilemma. I mean, we are forced by the linear nature of time to just collapse the infinite potential of our lives into a single reality.
Right.
And the moment we make that choice, we instantly create an almost life, a parallel existence built entirely out of what-ifs.
Wow, yeah. And that brings us to the source material we are unpacking today. We're exploring a truly sweeping narrative. It's called Almost Life by Kiran Millwood Hargrave.
It's incredible.
It really is. It tracks two women, Erica and Laure, across 4 decades. It starts with this brief, super intense summer romance in 1978 Paris and reverberates through the rest of their lives.
Yeah, but let's be clear right out of the gate here.
Good point.
The mission of this deep dive is not just to recap a love story. We are here to dissect the agonizing tectonic friction between domestic security and authentic passion.
We want to map out the anatomy of a lifelong connection, right? And examine the mechanisms of how our almost lives actively shape, haunt, and sometimes even save the lives we actually choose to live.
Exactly. So to give you a structural overview of what we're looking at, the sources present us with dual timelines and 2 intensely contrasting worlds. We have Erica, whose overarching trajectory is basically a pursuit of insulation. She's chasing a very traditional, provincial, structurally sound English life.
And opposite her is Laure.
Right. Whose existence is rooted in a bohemian, fiercely intellectual, and often deeply turbulent reality in Paris and rural France. The whole narrative engine is fueled entirely by the collision and subsequent repulsion of these 2 fundamentally incompatible ways of existing.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning. We have to start at the collision point, right? The inciting incident that sets this entire 4-decade machine into motion.
July 1978.
Yes, the sources place us in July 1978. We're in Paris, specifically on the sweltering, sun-bleached steps of the Sacré-Coeur. The sky is this fierce, unerring blue.
It's that kind of heat that presses down on you, making everything feel heavy.
Making everything slow. And stepping into this frame is Erica.
She's 18 years old.
Barely an adult.
Barely. And she's walking into Paris carrying a massive amount of psychological baggage disguised as a vacation.
She really is the absolute picture of a naive English tourist. She's from this provincial town called King's Lynn. And she has spent, like, all her weekend earnings from a part-time job trying to assemble a wardrobe that will make her look authentically French.
Authentically French in her own mind, anyway?
Right, in her own mind. She wants to blend in. She wants to be perceived as sophisticated.
Yeah.
So she's trudging up these steep cobblestones in the blistering heat, and she's wearing a floral polyester skirt that is just static clinging to her sweating thighs.
Ugh, polyester in July.
I know. Plus, a cheesecloth Bordeaux top that is entirely impractical, and cheap, thin sandals that are actively cutting blisters into her heels. She's sunburned, uncomfortable, and desperately trying to project this pristine postcard fantasy of Parisian life.
And sitting on those steps, waiting in the heat, is the absolute antithesis of that postcard.
Laure?
Laure. She is everything Erica is trying to pretend to be, but Laure isn't putting on a costume. Laure is an older art theory student at the Sorbonne. She's brutally hungover.
Completely feral.
Yeah, she's smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. She's wearing a slightly oversized man's shirt and gray trousers that are cut just a little too short at the ankle. Her hair is prematurely graying, and she smells faintly of stale beer and sharp tobacco.
A completely unvarnished reality.
What's fascinating here is the immediate power dynamic established through a very specific, brilliant detail in the text. They are both holding the exact same object.
A book. Yes. I love this detail so much. It tells you everything you need to know before they even speak a word to each other.
They're both holding copies of Roland Barthes' A Lover's Discourse, or Fragment d'un discours amoureux.
Which is heavy reading.
Very. To give some context, this book had only been published the year before, in 1977. Barthes was a monumental French philosopher, and A Lover's Discourse is essentially a deconstruction of the language of love.
Right. It's about how the lover is always in a state of trying to decipher the beloved, constantly projecting their own fantasies onto the object of their affection.
Exactly. The book argues that romantic love is largely an act of semiotics, reading signs and inventing meanings that might not even be there.
Which is incredibly ironic given what is about to happen between them.
Yeah.
But it's not just that they're reading the same philosopher. It's how they're interacting with the physical book itself.
Yeah, the physical object.
The sources note that Erica's copy is pristine. The spine isn't cracked. The pages are crisp. She literally bought it because a Parisian bookseller talked her into it.
She thought it would look cool.
Exactly. She thought sitting on the steps of a famous monument holding a dense French philosophical text would make her look like a true intellectual. She's using the book as a prop in the stage play of her own idealized vacation.
And the text emphasizes that Erica even admits to Laure later that she felt pretentious buying it. Contrast that with Laurie's copy of the exact same text.
It's destroyed.
It is dog-eared to the point of disintegration. The spine is shattered, the binding is perilous, pages threatening to fall out in the wind, and most tellingly, the pristine white cover is stained with overlapping purple wine glass rings.
She hasn't just skimmed it.
No, she has lived inside it. She's argued with it late into the night, spilled her life and her vices all over it.
The pristine fantasy versus the messy, stained reality. That is the entire architecture of their 40-year relationship, perfectly coded into a single physical prop. But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
We're romanticizing Laure a bit. The sources describe her as having this intense aura. Her friend Michelle later calls it her ravissement. It's this rapturous, terrifying, magnetic energy.
Yes.
She looks at Erica like a predator observing a very slow prey animal. And Erica's just this blank slate, right? She's 18, naive, projecting all her romantic fantasies onto Laure. Isn't there a fundamentally toxic power imbalance from the exact moment they meet?
That's a really valid question.
Like, is it really romance? Or is it a 20-something intellectual taking advantage of a teenager's desperate need to be seen as cool?
Well, that is precisely the tension the sources want us to interrogate. The concept of ravissement in French implies rapture, yes, but it also carries the historical connotation of abduction or carrying someone away by force.
Wow, abduction.
Right. Laure is, metaphorically, abducting Erica from her provincial mindset. However, your point about the power imbalance is crucial, because Erica is a deeply willing participant in this abduction. She wants to be taken.
She wants to be transformed.
Exactly. And the illusion of the postcard fantasy breaks entirely when a very grounded, uncomfortable reality intrudes on the scene.
Right, because Erica's fantasy of Paris doesn't include the actual dangers of being a young woman traveling alone.
No.
A persistent, aggressive man starts following Erica.
Ugh.
He follows her into the basilica. He sits too close to her. He follows her back out into the blistering heat. He won't take no for an answer. He is cornering her, and Erica is terrified. The politeness of her English upbringing has given her no tools to deal with actual malice.
So she runs back down the steps and throws herself down next to Laure, hoping proximity to another person will deter him.
But it doesn't.
No. The man follows her and hovers over them both, refusing to leave.
And what does Laure do? Does she stand up and politely ask him to leave? Does she threaten to call the police? No.
Not at all.
Laure doesn't even change her expression. Without missing a beat, Laure looks at the man and literally barks at him. Like a feral dog. She growls, she bares her teeth, she hisses.
It's a shocking mechanism of defense. A completely feral, visceral act that entirely rejects the social contract.
It is so animalistic. She abandons all societal convention, all feminine politeness to protect a complete stranger.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, it works perfectly.
Of course it does.
The man is so profoundly unnerved by this display of unpredictable wildness that he curses at them and immediately leaves. And for Erica, that specific moment, that terrifying display of wildness, completely cements her fascination.
It's intoxicating.
Have you ever been in a situation where you were trapped by politeness?
Yeah.
Where someone was making you deeply uncomfortable, but the social conditioning to, just be nice kept you frozen?
Oh, absolutely.
And then you see someone who just doesn't care about the rules. It's intoxicating.
It's the ultimate display of liberation. Laure is demonstrating that she is not bound by the rules that constrain Erica. Erica wants the guided tour of Paris, safe behind the glass of the bus. Laure is the gritty, loud, unpredictable reality of the city.
Which brings me back to my question. Is Erica actually falling in love with Laure in this moment? Or is she just falling in love with the idea of who she could be if she were brave enough to be with Laure?
Right, the identity question.
Yeah. Is she loving a person, or is she trying on an identity?
I would argue it's the latter, and Laure herself recognizes the mechanism at play. Laure explicitly notes that Erica's floaty floral skirt and her stiff new leather sactal look like a costume.
A literal costume.
A thing put on to walk around Paris and do things she would never normally dare to do back in King's Lynn. Laure provides Erica with the ultimate accessory for this costume, the identity of a bohemian lover.
And Erica leans into the costume hard. They start spending time together. They go to a dingy, smoke-filled bar. They drink warm gin.
Which Erica hates.
Secretly hates it. It burns her throat, but she pretends to tolerate it to seem tough. Laurel rolls her a cigarette, and Erica doesn't even want to smoke it, but she keeps it anyway just to have a physical object that Laura's hands touch.
It's excessive.
She goes back to her horrible, damp, cheap pension room, shaves her legs with a blunt razor, sprays herself with cheap Charlie Blue perfume, and marches to a book reading at a place called Le Divan, just to see Laura again.
The scene at the book reading is pivotal. It plunges Erica into Laure's actual, unvarnished world. It's not a romantic fantasy on the steps of a monument anymore.
No, it's real life.
It's a tight-knit, intimidating circle of Sorbonne students, philosophers, anthropologists, classicists. They're effortlessly cool, deeply engaged in radical politics, and unapologetically queer.
And Erica is hopelessly out of her depth. She's surrounded by people speaking rapid-fire French slang she can't parse. She is so nervous, she spills red wine all over herself.
Oh, the embarrassed.
She feels like a total fraud. But Laure steps in. Laurie takes her under her wing and gives her an anchor in this bewildering sea of intellect.
And this leads to them essentially cohabitating for the summer. They move a massive, unraveling Moroccan rug across Paris together, dragging it through the streets, which is a wonderful metaphor for the heavy, beautiful, fraying reality of their relationship.
I love that rug detail.
Yeah.
They spend the summer in Laurie's squat on Rue Charlot.
Yeah.
Erica is completely swept up in the current. They lie on that Moroccan rug in the stifling heat. They read Émile Zola out loud. They discuss art. They make love. Erica feels like she has cracked open a secret door to the universe.
But then the sources present a specific moment that acts as a profound foreshadowing of their inevitable rupture. They go to l'Orangerie Museum to look at Claude Monet's famous water lilies.
The Nympheus.
Yes, this scene is absolutely crucial for understanding the fundamental, unbridgeable divergence in their worldviews. They are looking at the exact same canvases, but processing them through entirely different psychological mechanisms.
Erica looks at the massive sweeping paintings of the water lilies, and she sees beauty. She sees a pretty chocolate box reflection of nature. She sees light and color and serenity. She sees it the way a tourist is programmed to see it.
But Laure actively despises that commodified, superficial view of Monet. Laurie's analysis of the art is much darker.
Much darker.
Laure looks at the water lilies and she sees death. She explains that to paint the reflection of the sky on the water is to paint the abyss. It is the darkness that underlies everything, the reflection of the heavens pulling you down into the deep, muddy, suffocating roots below.
As above, so below.
Exactly. It's a heavy existential burden that Laure carries. She sees the decay inherent in the beauty.
And Erica just isn't equipped to carry that burden. She doesn't want to look at the abyss. She just wants to buy a postcard of the pretty flowers.
Right.
And as the end of the summer approaches, the reality of the impending autumn sets in. The vacation is expiring. The costume is starting to feel heavy.
The mechanism of shame begins to override the mechanism of passion. Erica's internal monologue in the sources is devastatingly honest.
It is.
She admits to herself that the idea of going back to King's Lynn and telling her deeply conventional provincial parents that she is staying in Paris, living in a squat with an older female lover, is psychologically unthinkable for her.
The fear of societal rejection completely paralyzes her. She wants to get married. She wants to have children. She wants a simple, normal, socially sanctioned life. And she knows with absolute certainty that loving Laure will never, ever be simple.
It will be a life of constant friction.
So she initiates the rupture. And she does it with the blunt trauma of a teenager who doesn't yet understand the gravity of her actions.
She drops the bomb while they are literally lying in their underwear on that Moroccan rug, reading books. She just says, I start university next week. Just like that. It's like a circuit breaker tripping. Her system is overloaded by Laure's intensity and the impending reality of her choices, so her brain just shuts off the connection to protect the domestic grid she wants to build. The cord is yanked, and Laure goes into emotional freefall.
Laure walks her to the coach station in the gray, early morning light, carrying Erica's suitcase. It's a somber, muted farewell. They share a very light, very quick kiss below the ear, and Erica gets on the bus.
And this brings us to one of the core thematic questions of the deep dive. How does a person survive the sudden traumatic amputation of their first great love?
That's a brilliant question.
Yeah.
Because they don't just move on. The text shows us two entirely different, diametrically opposed survival mechanisms. For Erica, survival means rapid assimilation into the mainstream.
And for Laure, survival means total, terrifying obliteration.
Let us examine those diverging paths, starting with Erica in the early 1980s. She heads to the University of East Anglia, UEA, in Norfolk, England. She's pursuing an undergraduate degree and eventually a creative writing MA under the famous author Malcolm Bradbury.
And Erica is actively, aggressively trying to scrub the bohemian Parisian summer from her system.
She is trying to build the life she decided she was supposed to have. She sleeps with men, she dates a geography student named Robert, she drinks cheap beer on freezing English beaches. She's going through the motions of a conventional collegiate experience, trying to overwrite the memory of Laure.
And then the ultimate symbol of conventional security enters her life. She meets Anthony R.W. Cowper Gray.
Let's talk about Ant, because he is, well, he's a very specific type of archetype, isn't he?
Oh, completely.
He's a former Cambridge law student who decided law was too boring, so he pivoted to becoming a writer. He's tall, he's got this broad, imposing rugby player build. He's already had short stories published in prestigious literary magazines like Granta.
He's wealthy, he's profoundly confident, and he is deeply, unshakably entrenched in the British upper-middle class establishment.
Ant represents the absolute pinnacle of the security Erica craves. The mechanism of his seduction isn't just romantic. It is professional and structural. He champions her writing. He praises her stories. He makes her feel like a real author with a legitimate future.
But the true draw, the gravitational pull that locks Erica into his orbit, is the physical world he represents.
You're talking about the velvet cage. Think about your own life for a second, Have you ever stayed in a job or maintained a relationship or tolerated a bad situation just because the perks were too nice to give up?
Because the metaphorical crystal glasses were just too beautiful to walk away from.
Yes. Erica is doing what most of us do every day. She's choosing comfort over authenticity.
The sources illustrate this choice perfectly during a scene where Erica visits Ant's family estate for a New Year's Eve party. The estate is called Abbeydore House down in Surrey.
The sensory contrast here is incredible. Erica arrives completely broke. She literally had to borrow the train fare just to get there. She's wearing cheap shoes that are giving her blisters, much like the sandals in Paris. She steps out of Ant's car in the freezing cold and sees branded catering vans, sprawling manicured grounds, an actual literal country estate.
Compare this mental image to Laure's squat on Rue Charlot with the unraveling Moroccan mattress on the floor and the smell of stale beer. The dichotomy could not be starker.
Erica gets shown to a guest room that has a massive freestanding bathtub. She pours an expensive heavy oil that smells of crushed roses into the steaming hot water. She soaks in it, washing off the grime of her cheap student life.
The luxury is overwhelming for her.
It is. She wraps herself in a fluffy white towel that feels incredibly luxurious. Then she goes downstairs to the party, and Ant's mother, Elizabeth, hands her a gin and tonic in a heavy, cut crystal glass. And the text makes a very specific note here. The clink of the crystal against her teeth set a bell ringing in her head. She had never tasted anything so good.
That clink of crystal is the sound of the cage door locking. Erica is entirely dazzled. She's seduced by the ambient heat of the house, the extreme comfort, the total lack of financial or social struggle.
She realizes in a very calculating way that if she stays with Ant, she wouldn't have to work part-time as a typist in a drafty boarding house just to support her writing habit.
No, she could have a whole heated wing of a manor house to write in. Ant offers total insulation against the harshness of the world.
But the irony, and there is always irony when you try to outrun yourself, is that the insulation almost suffocates her immediately. She gets horribly messily drunk at that very same New Year's Eve party. She realizes she doesn't actually fit in with Ant's posh, braying, wealthy friends.
She throws up, and she wakes up the next morning, fully clothed on the bed, her cheap tights cutting painfully into her stomach.
She feels wretched and deeply out of place. But Ant comes into the room looking perfectly handsome and robust despite his own hangover, and he takes care of her. He doesn't judge her. He offers safety. And for Erica, safety is the ultimate currency.
Meanwhile, across the channel, safety is entirely absent. Laure's trajectory is a steep, terrifying descent into the abyss she warned Erica about. The grief of losing Erica exacerbates a profound darkness that Laure was already carrying.
She goes into freefall. She falls into a deeply codependent, toxic relationship with an artist named Gabrielle, who is a severe, late-stage alcoholic.
And Laure matches her drink for drink. This is critical to understand. This is not the romantic, bohemian, wine-soaked drinking of their summer in Paris.
It's not fun anymore.
This is not drinking for pleasure or philosophy. This is maintenance drinking. It is drinking strictly to stop the nervous system from collapsing, to stop the hands from shaking.
The sources are fiercely, brutally unsentimental about the depiction of addiction here. We need to look at the actual mechanism of what Laure is experiencing. Laure reaches a critical mass where she realizes that trying to achieve sobriety might literally kill her, but continuing to drink at this volume certainly will.
She attempts to detox in Gabrielle's dingy apartment, and the physiological reality of that withdrawal is harrowing.
To understand the how of alcohol withdrawal, you have to understand that alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. Over time, the brain compensates for the constant presence of this depressant by ramping up its excitatory neurotransmitters.
Right, and when the alcohol is suddenly removed, the brain is left in a state of massive, dangerous overexcitation. This leads to tremors, hallucinations, skyrocketing blood pressure, and severe hyperthermia.
Which is exactly what we see in the text. Laure's fevers spike so dangerously high that Gabrielle is forced to fill the bathtub with freezing cold water and physically submerge Laure in it just to bring her core temperature down to a survivable level.
It's terrifying.
Laure is hallucinating vividly. She dreams she is walking through the willow trees at Monet's garden in Giverny, but the branches are whipping her, and she is getting sharp thorns stuck in her eyes. It's an agonizing physical manifestation of her psychological pain.
And when the fever finally breaks, she isn't magically cured. She is left with this terrifying, hollow fragility. The sources note that she becomes hyper-aware of her own skeleton.
She can literally feel her bones resting beneath her skin.
Yes. She's acutely aware of the fragile mechanical workings of her living body. It takes the abstract poetic pain of a romantic tragedy and grounds it in stark, undeniable physiological suffering. Heartbreak, in this narrative, is not just a metaphor. It is a literal physical trauma that rewires her nervous system.
And this is where the survival mechanism of obliteration has to transition into the agonizing work of rebuilding. Laure eventually finds the strength to leave Gabrielle's apartment. She retreats to her father, Philippe, who lives in a decaying, drafty farmhouse in rural Normandy.
Philippe is a complex figure. He is also a lifelong alcoholic. He's a manual laborer who reads voraciously, often quoting French literature, but he has largely wasted his intellectual potential. Yet, despite his flaws, he is a safe harbor for his daughter.
There is a profoundly moving, quiet scene that illustrates this rebuilding process perfectly. Laure's friend Michel comes to visit her at the Normandy farmhouse. Michel brings a plastic bag of groceries, including some oranges. Laure's father, Philippe, takes one of the oranges.
And with his thick, calloused working man's hands, he slowly and carefully begins to peel it for Laure.
It's a microscopic act of grace. The sharp, clean scent of the citrus oils hits the air, and Laure is suddenly transported back to her childhood. She remembers waking up as a little girl to find that her father had peeled an orange and left it resting on the wooden newel post at the bottom of the stairs for her to eat on her way to the school bus.
It is this quiet, steady, enduring act of parental care manifesting in the midst of absolute ruin.
I want to pause here and connect this back to you, the listener. Think about the mechanisms we use to put ourselves back together after a catastrophic failure or a heartbreak. Erica is using Ant, his wealth, and his crystal glasses as a shield. She is hiding behind the armor of a conventional life so she doesn't have to feel the complex, messy emotions of her choices.
And Laure has no shield.
Laure burned her shield. Laure has to face the abyss, dry out her own poisoned blood, sit in the quiet of a freezing farmhouse, and physically rebuild her capacity to endure the world.
And through immense willpower, she does. She manages to get sober, she starts teaching art theory again, she stabilizes. But the tragedy of human memory is that the past is rarely content to stay buried.
Which brings us to 1983, the relapse. 5 years have passed, and the fantasy of that Parisian summer exerts a gravitational pull that Erica simply cannot resist.
The structural setup for this relapse is critical. Erica is now officially married to Ant. Ant's career is skyrocketing. He has published 2 highly successful novels, Excavations and Gargantuan. They have money, they have social standing, and Ant is gently but firmly suggesting that they start trying to conceive a child.
And Erica panics. The walls of the velvet cage are shrinking. The reality of true, irreversible domesticity motherhood terrifies her, so she invents an escape hatch.
The writing retreat.
Yeah, she convinces Ant that she desperately needs to go to Paris alone on a writing retreat. She tells him she's working on a restrained literary novella called Passing Rain. And playing the supportive, wealthy husband funds the trip. Erica rents a chic flat in the 17th arrondissement.
But let's be entirely honest with ourselves here. We all know exactly why she is in Paris.
She is not hunting for inspiration. She is hunting a ghost.
She systematically seeks out Laure's old friend Leia, knowing full well that this proximity will inevitably lead her back to Laure. And when it does, the physical magnetism between them hasn't faded in the slightest.
Not one single bit. The collision is instantaneous. They fall right back into each other's arms as if the intervening half-decade never happened. Erica practically abandons her upscale, aunt-funded apartment to go live in Laure's bohemian world all over again.
Just right back into it.
They wake up tangled in sheets, they drink strong coffee, they walk the streets of Paris, they make love. Erica feels this overwhelming rush of euphoria. She feels like she is finally, truly living the life she was always meant to live.
But the underlying psychological tension, the friction that broke them apart in 1978, is still there. And this time, it manifests directly through Erica's writing. Laure, who is an academic and a ruthless critic of art, asks to read the draft of Erica's novella, Passing Rain.
Oh, the mechanism of this fight is so brutal and so recognizable. Erica pitches the premise of the book to Laure. 3 estranged brothers return to their childhood home to sit quietly beside their father's deathbed. Past love slowly surface. It's raining outside. It sounds fine.
It sounds incredibly competent, polite, and deeply British.
But Laure never pulls her punches regarding art. She reads the manuscript and she tells Erica the absolute, unvarnished truth. Laure says there is a profound hollowness at the center of the book. She diagnoses it perfectly. It feels like a story Erica thinks she should write.
It's safe.
Exactly. It is a polite, acceptable, emotionally restrained novel designed to win quiet applause, rather than a story she organically needs to write. Laure tells her it lacks compulsion, it lacks blood.
And Erica lashes out viciously. Her imposter syndrome flares up like a supernova. And let's look at the mechanism of imposter syndrome here. Why does Erica write a safe book? Because if a safe, formulaic book fails, it's the market's fault. But if she pours her actual, messy, passionate soul onto the page and that fails, it means she is a failure.
Oof. Laure's critique threatens the very core of Erica's fragile ego. So Erica gets defensive. She accuses Laure of being a pretentious academic snob. She yells that Laure doesn't understand that money actually matters, that Erica wants to be published, that she wants to be read by the masses.
She goes on the attack because she knows, deep down in her bones, that Laure is entirely right. Laure sees right through the performance of the serious author to the terrified girl underneath.
Erica's fear is the dominant driving force of her entire character arc. During this Paris trip, she's constantly playing out different versions of her life on fast-forward in her mind. If she actually leaves Aunt for Laure, she envisions the crushing reality, the bitter fights over lack of money, the cramped, freezing apartments, the total lack of societal or familial approval.
Not to mention the grinding guilt of betraying her perfectly nice husband.
Exactly. She wants to possess the emotional depth of Laure's world, but she's utterly terrified of the atmospheric pressure required to survive there. I was thinking about this, and the best analogy I can come up with is a deep-sea diver who gets the bends.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Erica dives down into this intense, dark, crushing depth of real passion with Laure. She sees the glowing, terrifying creatures of the deep. But then she looks around, she feels the immense atmospheric pressure building on her chest, and she realizes she might not actually be strong enough to survive down there.
So she panics.
She kicks her fins as hard as she can and rushes blindly back to the surface, back to the bright, easy, breathable air of Ant's world. And because she ascends too quickly, she gets the bends.
Yeah.
She causes immense, explosive, crippling damage to everyone involved in the process.
That is a highly accurate mechanical metaphor. And the external catalyst that forces her panicked rush to the surface is Ant's sudden, unannounced arrival in Paris.
Right. Ant's international book tour in Singapore gets canceled due to logistical issues, so he just hops on a plane and flies to Paris to surprise his wife. He calls Erica from a payphone at Charles de Gaulle Airport.
Erica is deeply hungover from her vicious fight with Laure about the book. She's sitting alone in the expensive aunt-funded apartment, holding the telephone receiver. She knows in that exact second that the fantasy is over. She has to make a definitive choice right now.
She hangs up with Aunt and immediately tries to call Laure, but the phone just rings and rings. Laure isn't home. And that silence on the other end of the line is all it takes for Erica's resolve to completely crumble. The diver kicks for the surface.
Anne arrives at the apartment completely oblivious to the affair, full of love, carrying his luggage and his optimism. He looks at Erica and he tells her that he recently read a medical article stating that alcohol consumption makes it harder for a woman to conceive.
Oh, no.
He notes that she isn't drinking wine with lunch, and he happily assumes that she is actively preparing her body for pregnancy.
Oh my God, the guilt in that scene is physically sickening to read. He is so pure, so earnest in his intentions, and she is so entirely submerged in deception and cowardice. And what does she do? She makes the ultimate betrayal. Hungover, terrified, and seeking an anchor, she allows Aunt to take her to bed.
They sleep together.
And the sources note the twisted psychological mechanism at play in Erica's mind. She rationalizes that sleeping with her husband is a profound betrayal of her lover, Laure. And somehow, committing that betrayal against Laure cancels out the guilt of her ongoing betrayal of Aunt.
It is an astonishing display of twisted mental accounting.
To assuage her own guilt, she effectively physically chooses the structural security of her marriage over the terrifying uncertainty of Laure. But I have to ask, can we really judge Erica for this? Can we judge her for choosing safety and warmth over poverty and struggle? Isn't the pursuit of safety a fundamental human survival instinct?
We can understand it, certainly. But if we connect this to the broader thematic argument of the text, it serves as a profound commentary on the privilege of choice. Erica has a golden safety net to retreat to. She can put on the costume of the bohemian lover, play in the dirt for a few weeks, and when the reality of that dirt gets too cold, she can simply take the costume off and return to her velvet cage in the English countryside.
That Laure cannot.
Laure does not have that luxury. Laure is the life she lives. There is no wealthy husband waiting to bail her out. When Erica finally calls Laure the next day to confess that Aunt is in Paris, the finality is devastating.
What does Laure say?
Laure doesn't scream or cry. Laure simply says goodbye and gently places the receiver down. The door is shut. The boundary is set.
And while Erica frantically packs her bags and retreats to the insulated, manicured safety of Norfolk to play the role of the devoted wife, the actual world that Laure inhabits is about to be hit by a historical, systemic tragedy that makes Erica's suburban angst look incredibly small and self-indulgent.
The narrative shifts its focus to 1985. And here, the harsh reality of world events comes crashing into the personal narrative in a very specific, historically grounded way.
We have to look at the historical context of what happens next. Laure is in Paris, and she receives an urgent phone call from her close friend Barbara. Barbara is frantic. She tells Laure that the American movie star Rock Hudson has just collapsed in the lobby of the Ritz Hotel in Paris.
Barbara is literally reading the newspaper headlines aloud over the phone. To ground us in the timeline, the sources introduced terms that were just entering the public consciousness. Words like LAV, lymphadenopathy-associated virus, which we now know as HIV, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, unexplained, rapid weight loss, total liver failure.
And the reason Barbara's calling Laure in a panic isn't just to share sensational celebrity gossip. It's to talk about their dear friend, Michelle.
Michelle, the beautiful, vibrant, kinetic Michelle who used to run the local community cafe where they all hung out. The man who danced to Diana Ross, who brought Laure oranges, who affectionately called Laura his little sister.
The sources are very careful here to ground this section in the terrifying, confusing reality of that specific historical moment. We aren't looking at this crisis through the sanitized, retrospective lens of modern medicine.
No, we're looking at it through the eyes of people on the ground in 1985 who are suddenly facing an entirely incurable, poorly understood, and heavily, viciously stigmatized disease that is ravaging their immediate community.
Laure goes to see Michelle, and the physical transformation the text describes is absolutely shattering. Michelle used to be the most vital, beautiful man in any room he walked into. Now, Laure finds him bundled up in a heavy wool sweater that his mother knitted for him, despite it not being cold.
He looks like a fragile bag of bones.
When they walk down the street to catch the bus, strangers actively stop and stare at him with a mix of fear and disgust.
What is truly remarkable and vital to Laure's character arc in this section is the depiction of platonic love as a survival mechanism. Michelle confesses to Laure that other people, well-meaning friends, come to visit him in his apartment, but when they come, they just sit and cry.
Which doesn't help him.
Exactly. And Michelle realizes they aren't actually crying for him. They are crying for themselves, for their own terror of mortality. Or worse, they try to feverishly clean his apartment, trying to improve his condition, trying to manage a situation that is fundamentally unmanageable to give themselves an illusion of control.
But not Laure. Laure steps up in a way that is so quietly, profoundly heroic. She doesn't try to fix him because she knows she can't. She doesn't pity him because pity strips a dying person of their dignity. She just sits with him. She makes him tea.
They sit on his sofa and watch old Hollywood musicals together.
They listen to the upbeat, campy records of the Italian pop star Sacré-Coeur. She allows him to just be a person, not a patient, and not a tragedy.
This raises an incredibly important point about Laure's evolution. When we first met her, we saw her as the intimidating, slightly predatory seductress on the steps. Then we saw her as the broken, chaotic addict drowning in a bathtub. But here, stripped entirely of the ego and the selfish demands of romantic entanglement, she becomes deeply grounded.
She becomes a fiercely loyal, reliable caretaker.
The sheer scale of the tragedy anchors her in a harsh but undeniable reality. She learns how to show up for someone else.
It's a massive structural shift in her psyche. Michelle's terminal illness forces her to look entirely outside of her own heartbreak. There is a profound piece of dialogue where Michelle tells her, "When you touch one life, save one life, you save all of humanity."
He is quoting the Talmud.
And the subtext is clear. By being there for Michelle, by holding his hand as he dies, Laure is actually saving her own soul. But across the channel, Erica is doing the exact opposite. Erica is completely losing her grip on reality.
Which brings us into the 1990s. The script for our two protagonists has completely ironically flipped.
Erica is now living full-time in the Mill House in Norfolk. She has exactly, down to the letter, what she told Laure she wanted back in 1978. She has the beautiful, sprawling historic house with sweeping views of the water meadows. She has the highly successful, wealthy husband. She has two healthy daughters, Sylvia and Eli. She has built the perfect domestic diorama.
But the reality of that domestic dream is actively suffocating her.
The mechanism of her unraveling is deeply psychological. She is entirely subsumed by the relentless, grinding demands of motherhood. The sources detail that she experiences severe, crippling postpartum depression, which Erica refers to internally with deep shame as her madness.
She describes the physical sensation of this depression not just as being tired, but as carrying a literal physical boulder of gravel grinding inside her head.
She is profoundly lonely. She is isolated in the countryside. She is terrified of the dark resentment she feels toward her own crying babies. And worst of all, her identity as an artist, as a writer, has completely evaporated.
Let's look at the professional contrast. Erica's book, An Inheritance, which is the final published version of that restrained novella Passing Rain, was eventually picked up by a tiny, obscure press.
It had absolutely no marketing budget, no launch party, and it disappeared into the ether without a trace.
It failed precisely because it was safe. Meanwhile, Ant's career is stratospheric. He is winning major literary awards, he is going on international multi-city book tours, he is attending glamorous publishing parties in London where people are doing cocaine off the toilet seats.
He's living the life Erica wanted, and Erica is left behind in Norfolk to choose paint colors for the kitchen and change dirty nappies.
And then the ultimate tragedy strikes, the event that truly breaks her fragile psyche. She suffers a miscarriage at 14 weeks. It was a boy. She had already named him Gabriel.
The psychological fallout from this trauma is hauntingly depicted. Erica begins to dream vividly of Gabriel. But in her dreams, he isn't a fetus or a baby. He's a fully grown adult man. And this man looks exactly identically like her husband, Ant.
In the dream, this grown man pats her on the shoulder and says, "It's all right, Mama."
It is so deeply unsettling. It's her subconscious mocking her, showing her the exact replica of the husband who is currently failing to support her through the grief. And to make matters infinitely worse, Ant commits an act of profound, unforgivable professional betrayal.
He takes Erica's intensely private, bloody, agonizing trauma of the miscarriage, and he turns it into material.
He writes a thinly fictionalized short story about a woman losing a baby, and he sells it to the New Yorker.
This is a critical point to analyze the parasitism of art. Ant literally cannibalizes his wife's trauma to feed his own success. He consumes her pain, processes it through his own ego, and publishes it for acclaim.
It is the ultimate betrayal of marital intimacy. Erica realizes that her husband doesn't actually see her as a partner in pain. He sees her as content.
It's sickening. And while Erica is descending into this domestic madness, trapped in a house with a man who harvests her grief for magazine pieces, where's Laure?
Laure is ascending. In a complete reversal of fortunes, Laure is now entirely sober, emotionally stable, and deeply rooted. She has built a quiet, enduring life with her partner, Barbara.
They live together in her late father's farmhouse in Normandy, the same place she once detoxed in agony.
She has taken the profound, world-shattering grief of losing her father and the trauma of losing Michelle to the plague. And she hasn't drowned in it. She has channeled it. She writes a book called Reflections.
And it is a massive, undeniable hit. It's not a tiny press release like Erica's. Reflections enters the Sunday Times nonfiction bestseller chart. It sells rights in multiple foreign languages. It is a critical darling and a commercial triumph.
It is the exact kind of success Erica has been starving for. And the dedication of Laure's book is beautiful. She dedicates it to Claude Monet, to her father Philippe, and to Michel.
So we have to pause and ask, what does this structural reversal mean? It is the supreme irony of the narrative. Erica sacrificed her authentic passion. She abandoned Laure, specifically because she believed a normal, conventional life would keep her safe.
But that desperate pursuit of safety is exactly what drove her to isolation, betrayal, and madness.
Laure, on the other hand, accepted the chaotic, marginalized, painful path. She walked barefoot through the fire of severe addiction and the horrors of a pandemic, and because she faced the reality of the abyss, it led her to profound emotional stability, enduring love with Barbara, and actualized, undeniable artistic success.
And the most painful part is that Erica has to stand there and watch it happen. Erica attends Laure's massive book launch event at Hatchard's, the famous bookstore in London. Erica is pressed into a corner of the crowded room, holding a plastic cup of lukewarm white wine, listening to the sophisticated crowd revere the woman she used to sleep with on a dirty mattress.
And when Laure stands up at the podium to give her speech, she publicly, proudly thanks her partner Barbara, looking right at her and saying, "To love you and to be yours."
Erica's internal reaction to this speech is intensely revealing about her character. She doesn't feel warm pride for her old friend's survival and success. She feels a deep, abrading, toxic jealousy.
The sources describe it as a ravening desire for possession.
Erica looks at Laure and realizes, with crushing certainty, that the woman she threw away because she wasn't safe enough has somehow become the exact person Erica always dreamed of being.
These simmering resentments, these decades of unspoken what-ifs and toxic jealousy, they finally, inevitably come to a head when the two women are forced into the same physical space one last time. It's the mid-1990s, and the entire Capper-Gray family aunt, Erica, and the two young girls go to France to visit Laure and Barbara at the farmhouse in Normandy.
The psychological tension of this visit is agonizing to analyze. On the surface, Aunt is playing the jovial, slightly oblivious, successful British husband on holiday, seemingly unaware that his wife's former lover is hosting them for dinner.
Oh, but Aunt absolutely knows. This is the most twisted part. He admits it to Erica much later. He figured it out years ago just by analyzing Erica's writing and noticing the hyper-specific, obsessive way she talked about Paris and her friend Laure.
He knew the whole time. He brought his family to Normandy almost as a psychological test, or a victory lap. He wanted to parade his beautiful children and his success in front of Laure to prove that he won. He wanted to mark his territory. It is so deeply messed up.
It adds an incredibly thick, suffocating layer of awkwardness to the entire visit. But the truly pivotal, transcendent moment of the trip doesn't happen at the farmhouse dinner table. It happens when they all take a day excursion to Giverny to see Claude Monet's famous garden.
They are standing in front of the exact same water lilies they argued over in 1978. Erica is standing on the iconic green Japanese bridge, watching her two daughters lean over the railing to look at their reflections in the water. From the outside, it is a perfect, idyllic domestic photograph.
But then Laure steps up quietly beside her. They are standing shoulder to shoulder, and for just a fraction of a second, Laure's cool, soft hand brushes against Erica's. Their pinky fingers extend, they find each other, and they twist together like small vines.
The textural description of this moment is breathtaking. It describes the sensation as the other life momentarily overlaying reality, like gossamer, or like a sudden breath of cold air. For that one split second on the bridge, the ghost ship pulls directly alongside the real ship.
They both physically feel the immense weight of what could have been. They feel the decades of conversations they didn't get to have, the mornings they didn't wake up together, the entire alternate universe they didn't build.
And Laure feels it deeply. Laure looks at Erica and realizes that the spark she saw in the 18-year-old girl back on the steps of the Sacré-Coeur is still buried in there somewhere, beneath the cardigans and the maternal exhaustion.
But Laurie's the one who is actually grounded in reality now. Laure looks down at Erica's children. She looks over at Erica's husband, and she knows with absolute certainty that it is an illusion. She knows that her chances with Erica were spent decades ago. The bank is empty.
And that quiet realization on the bridge perfectly sets the stage for the explosive climax of the narrative. Later that same year, Laure travels to England and visits Norfolk for Erica's daughter Sylvia's birthday party.
The atmosphere is a nightmare of domestic chaos. The house is full of screaming toddlers, sticky purple balloons, half-eaten cake, and absolute frenzy.
Erica's frantic. She's burning mini pizzas in the oven. She is completely visibly overwhelmed by the life she built. Ant, playing the benevolent manager, suggests that Erica take a break and go for a walk on the beach with Laure to catch up.
They walk out of the chaotic house and onto the vast, flat, gray expanse of the Norfolk beach. The tide is out, leaving a massive stretch of wet, freezing sand. And away from the noise of her family, Erica just fundamentally breaks down.
She confesses everything. She tells Laure how lost she feels, how deeply bored and bone-tired she is, how she feels like her brain is turning to mush from the lack of intellectual stimulation. And in her desperation, she tries to pull Laure back into the fantasy of 1978. She literally reaches out, grabs Laure's wrist, and says, "I miss you. I wanted it to happen in Normandy."
Let's analyze Erica's psychological mechanism here. Erica is not looking for love. She is looking for an escape hatch. She is drowning in the domestic life she willingly constructed, and she wants Laure to act as her life raft.
She wants Laure to save her from the consequences of her own choices.
But Laure's response is an absolute masterclass in hard-won emotional maturity and boundary setting.
Laure absolutely refuses to play the game. She pulls her wrist away. She looks at Erica standing on this massive beach, and she says, "Have you seen where you live? Have you seen your beautiful children, your successful husband?" She forces Erica to look at the immense privilege of her reality.
And then Laure delivers the ultimate necessary rejection. Laure says, her waiting paid off. I love Barbara.
It is a devastatingly clear boundary. Laure refuses to be reduced to an experiment, a nostalgic summer fling, or an emergency exit for a bored housewife.
Laure did the agonizing work of building a real, sustainable life with someone who actually stayed through the hardest, darkest parts of her journey, and she will absolutely not throw that piece away for the ghost of a girl who abandoned her when things got difficult.
Erica is humiliated. The rejection pierces right through her. She is desperate, her ego is shattered, so what does? She acts out. She strips off all her clothes right there on the freezing beach.
She puts on an ugly, utilitarian black Marks & Spencer swimsuit she brought with her.
And she runs headlong, screaming, into the freezing gray water of the North Sea. She ducks her head under the freezing waves and screams bubbles into the current.
The symbolism is heavy but effective. It's a baptismal moment. It's an exorcism of the fantasy.
I kept thinking of Erica's desperation on the beach, like trying to wear a winter coat you outgrew decades ago just because you remember being warm in it once. You're standing in the cold, frantically trying to shove your adult arms into these tiny childish sleeves, literally ripping the seams apart, entirely refusing to admit that the garment simply doesn't fit your body anymore.
And it begs the question, is Erica actually mourning the loss of Laure in that freezing water, or is she just mourning the 18-year-old version of herself, the girl on the steps who still had her entire life ahead of her before all the choices were locked in?
It's almost certainly the latter. It is the mourning of infinite potential. As we discussed at the beginning, when you make choices, you collapse the quantum wave of your life. Potential becomes reality, and reality is always inevitably narrower, sharper, and heavier than potential.
But there's a moment of grace. While Erica is floating on her back in the freezing sea, teeth chattering, she looks back at the shoreline. And Laure is standing there on the wet sand, completely naked, unashamed, her hair now totally silver, shining in the flat gray light.
Laure doesn't run away. She wades into the freezing water to meet Erica. They are the only two people visible on this entire desolate patch of earth. They embrace in the water, violently shivering in the cold, holding on to each other one last time.
And in that freezing, painful embrace, the fever finally breaks. They both truly understand in their bones what their relationship actually is and what it can never, ever be again.
The aftermath of this exorcism for Laure is quiet, resolute, and deeply moving. Laure takes the train back to London alone. In the drizzling rain, she walks through Bloomsbury until she reaches the famous independent bookstore, Gaze the Word.
She walks right past the display of her own best-selling book in the window, and she goes straight to the poetry section. She buys a collection of poetry by Tom Gunn titled The Man with Night Sweats, which is a profoundly moving text dealing with the AIDS crisis, the loss of community, and the endurance of grief.
She takes the book back to her solitary hotel room. She reads the poetry, and she actively accepts her life. She accepts her survival. She accepts Barbara. The door closes on Erica and on the fantasy of 1978 for the final time.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the epilogue, the final years. We've tracked them through the decades, and now we reach the end of the line.
The narrative jumps forward in time. Laure's end does not come in a flash of drama. It comes slowly through the betrayals of the physical body. She suffers a series of strokes, what the French medical system refers to as AVCs, or accidents vasculaires cérébraux.
By the year 2010, Laure is only 54 years old, but her body is failing. She is sitting in a wheelchair on a balcony in Paris. The strokes have ravaged her. She can no longer speak clearly, and the entire right side of her body is paralyzed. But the sources are clear. Her mind, her brilliant, analytical mind, remains entirely sharp.
The description of her final moments on that balcony is so incredibly peaceful despite the physical decay. The text notes that the pain in her body ratchets up to an unbearable level, but then suddenly she pushes through the pain to the other side of it. She feels weightless, she isn't hot, she isn't cold.
In her final seconds, her mind drifts. She thinks of her father, Philippe, peeling the orange. She thinks of Michel, laughing and holding a rabbit. She thinks of the massive Monet paintings at l'Orangerie. She imagines death not as a terrifying black abyss, but as a quiet garden with weeping willows leaning over a still lake.
And then her heart simply stops. Laure is gone.
It is a dignified exit. But the tragedy of the disconnected timelines is that Erica, living her insulated life in Norfolk, has absolutely no idea that the defining figure of her youth has just died.
3 entire years pass. It is May 18th, 2013. Erica is sitting alone in the dark in her house in Norfolk, watching the 10 o'clock evening news on the BBC.
To ground us in the timeline, the sources note the specific historical event occurring on this day. The news anchor is reporting on a major legislative shift in France, the official legalization of same-sex marriage.
And just to be clear, for our purposes, we are not examining the complex politics of this historical event. We are looking strictly at how this specific news broadcast acts as the psychological trigger that prompts Erica to act.
Exactly. Hearing the news about France and same-sex couples triggers a profound wave of nostalgia. It prompts Erica to open her laptop in the dark living room and search for Laure's name on Yahoo. She realizes she hasn't looked her up in years.
She scrolls through the expected search results for Laure's bestseller, Reflections. But then she finds a newer, unfamiliar article in a French literary magazine. It's a review of a posthumous book by Laure, a book called L'Abîme, or The Abyss.
And embedded in that article is a photograph of Laure, but it is not the silver-haired, shining woman from the beach. And it is certainly not the fierce intellectual from the steps of the Sacré-Coeur. It is a photograph of Laure post-stroke. The right side of her face is severely sagging, her eyelid droops heavily, her mouth hangs open in a permanent, uncontrolled slackness.
The text is brutally honest about Erica's reaction. Her immediate, visceral, instinctive reaction to the photo is physical repulsion. She recoils from the image of decay, and that instantaneous repulsion is immediately, crushingly chased by a deep, suffocating wave of guilt.
She reads the article and sees that Laure's final book was a memoir about her severe alcoholism, her theories on art, and her profound, enduring love for Barbara. Erica's name is nowhere to be found.
Erica realizes, sitting alone in the cold blue light of her laptop screen, that Laure has been dead for 3 full years. And she didn't know. The universe didn't send her a sign. No cosmic string vibrated in her chest when Laure's heart stopped. No intuition warned her. The other life, the ghost ship she had kept sailing in her mind for 35 years, had quietly sunk to the bottom of the ocean, and the universe didn't even blink.
It is a crushing, humiliating realization of her own absolute lack of importance in the final, most crucial chapters of Laure's life. Erica was the protagonist of her own fantasy, but she was barely a footnote in Laure's reality. But to Erica's credit, this brutal realization also prompts a final, beautiful, necessary act of closure.
Erica closes the laptop. She goes upstairs and is awake, listening to classical music in his study. She tells him simply that she is taking the dog for a walk. She goes out into the pitch black of the night, walking down to the very same Norfolk beach where they had their final, freezing confrontation years ago. She is carrying a small, worn jewelry box that she has kept hidden in the back of a drawer for 35 years.
Inside that box is the remnants of the cigarette that Laure rolled for her on the pavement outside that dingy Parisian bar in the summer of 1978. After 3.5 decades, the rolling paper is unspooling and yellowed. The tobacco inside is dry, shrunken, and turned to dust.
Erica scoops the dry tobacco in the ash into the palm of her hand. She wades out into the freezing, invisible sea in the dark. She opens her hand and she lets the sharp easterly breeze take the fragile fragments away. She scatters the absolute last physical evidence of their love into the dark water.
And as the dust blows away in her mind's eye, she sees Laure, not the woman in the wheelchair and not the naked woman on the beach. She sees the 18-year-old girl sitting on the sun-baked steps of the Sacré-Coeur, smoking a roll-up, waiting for her life to begin. Erica smiles into the dark, and in her best bad tourist French, she says one single word to the ghost. Bonjour.
It brings the entire four-decade narrative full circle. It asks the listener, how do we carry the ghosts of the people who profoundly shaped us without letting them haunt us to death? Erica finally, after 35 years, stops trying to force the ghost to live. She acknowledges the memory, she honors the origin of the feeling, and then she actively lets it go to the sea.
What an absolute journey, from a sweltering, violently sunny staircase in Paris to the freezing, pitch-black waters of the Norfolk Sea. A lifetime of choices, cowardly mistakes, domestic betrayals, and profound, altering love.
It makes you think. We spend so much of our limited time on this earth mourning the almost lives we didn't get to live. We stand on the shore weeping over the ghost ships we watch sailing away in the fog, punishing ourselves for the choices we made. But what if those ghost lives aren't actually tragedies? What if the ability to keep those beautiful, passionate fantasies alive in the quiet corners of our minds is the exact, necessary mechanism that gives us the psychological strength to survive the mundane, difficult, deeply imperfect lives we actually chose to board?
It is a haunting, beautiful thought to leave with. The fantasy doesn't have to be real to be useful.
It really doesn't. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the mechanisms of memory and choice. We hope you look at your own ghost ships a little differently tonight. Until next time.